Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst at Google in Switzerland. So I work together with the engineers and together with webmasters like you guys to help make sure that communications flows in both ways. Looks like we have a bunch of people here already. We have a lot of questions that were submitted already here as well. You're welcome to add more questions if you want. If you're in here live, feel free to ask away during the answers or the questions if you have more comments or ideas. And as always, I think there are a few more events lined up where you can also add your questions. So if I don't get to your question here, feel free to add it to one of the future ones. All right. Before we get started on the questions, do any of you want to ask the first question?
Hey, John. I'd like to come in with a question. Thank you. I've noticed that Google is trying to access some 404 resources for up to 3 months plus. I mean, it's like indefinite. It just keeps coming over and over, and it still gets 404, as those resources will never return on a website, and they are quite a lot. Based on the last of the videos posted by Matt Katz, in which said we can use 410 as an alternative. What happens if I place a 404? If I replace a 404 with 410 on a large scale to trying to save some server resources?
I think you might see a small change in how we crawl them, but probably not something big. So if we're crawling, usually if we recognize that this is a 404, if it's been a 404 for a while, we won't crawl it as frequently as we would a normal page. So that might be instead of every week, maybe we'll crawl it every month. But of course, if you have a lot of these URLs, if you had things like session IDs or something like that that all return 404 now, even if we crawl the individual URLs once a month, that could still be a lot of requests. So I think what would happen with a 410 there is maybe we'll crawl a little bit less frequently than a month, but even if that's every 1.5 months, that's still something that could add up if you have a lot, like a large number of these URLs. If the crawling is effectively a problem there, you could use a robots text directive to block crawling of those URLs, but past that, there's no way to really prevent us from trying those URLs again, because we think maybe if we find a new link to those pages, maybe if we know about these pages and think, oh, maybe there's good content here now, we'll just want to retry them to double check that we're not missing anything important. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you about, we encountered this kind of coming backs, the returns for real estate properties. A real estate property, when it's sold, I mean, it won't be placed to be sold again near time soon, you know. And there are tens of thousands of real estate properties which gets into 404, I mean, on a daily basis. So we thought that if we could change 404 to 410, maybe Google will definitely understand that these properties are no longer available as they were sold.
We'll still want to double check them, especially if we find a new link to those pages. We'll want to double check them from time to time. What really the main difference between a 404 and a 410 is kind of the time it takes from a URL that is indexed currently until it's dropped out of the index. So a 404 is something we'd see as being potentially temporary, in that if we know of a page and it turns into a 404, we'll retry it a few times before we remove it completely. Whereas with a 410, if we see a 410 for a page like that, we'll drop it a lot faster. So the change will be faster, but afterwards the recrawling won't necessarily be less frequent.
I understand. Okay, thank you very much. Then perhaps we can try with one website to see how it goes, and then we will decide. The only problem I had, it was not to go on the other side to get something wrong by testing it. Can I step in with another short question?
Sure.
I've seen related also with often crawling that the old directive crawl delay from the robots.txt got banned by Google. I mean, it gets ignored. And in Webmaster Tools, we even get a message saying that Google doesn't support anymore this directive. How can we delay the crawl? I mean, Google comes and crawl in a very big amount at certain points. And if we can make this delay, which we used to use as a crawl delay parameter, it will be a lot easier for a lot of websites.
We actually never supported that directive, so I think that's something from Yahoo specifically. But we never supported that. So the biggest problem we had with that directive is that the values specified there were completely unusable, in that people would say you can crawl 5 times a day, and for us, crawling 5 URLs a day from a website is not going to get us anywhere. So that's essentially why we don't use that. What you can do in Webmaster Tools, you can set the crawl rate for almost all websites, the maximum crawl rate. For websites that don't let you set a crawl rate, you can use the report a problem with Googlebot form, which is there as well, which lets you send a report to the team working on the Googlebot to let you kind of like give them feedback on the crawling, where you can say, oh, you're crawling much too much, or maybe if you could crawl more if you crawl during my evening times when my users aren't on the website. So that's the kind of feedback you could give the Googlebot team there.
I see. Maybe as a suggestion, maybe you guys can implement something like a crawl rate. I mean, if it will be in seconds, and if we can set up a delay, it will be much easier for a larger database of websites. I mean, if we manage a lot of websites.
Yeah, I mean, for most of them, you can set that directly in Webmaster Tools. What might make sense at some point is putting that into the API. I know it was in the old API, so that you can programmatically set that if you wanted to. Maybe that would work for in your case.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, let's run through the questions that were submitted and see how far we can get there. Does Googlebot or Google understand incorrectly formatted no-follow requests? For example, if someone writes rel no-follow as rel equals no space follow with a space or with a dash, will Google understand these? No, we don't actually understand these. So one tricky part there, these rel directives, if you have spaces in them, they're actually different directives, so they're separate directives there. And with a dash, that's something we don't support as well. So if you really want to no-follow a link, you really need to do it technically correct. And you don't need to use quotes, so you could just use rel equals no-follow or use quotes if you want to. But essentially, the no-follow has to be written there correctly and has to be clearly a part of the link. Recently, number of duplicate title and description tags have increased by a large number in Webmaster Report. The reason for same is that Google is indexing URLs with position IDs, query parameters, even though the canonical has been set up. Why is this happening? From a technical point of view, what happens when we see a URL with a rel canonical is first we have to index that URL so that we can actually look at the content of that page. So if you have a URL that you don't want to have canonical and we find it and we crawl it, we find the rel canonical there, first we index the version that actually you supplied like that. And then when we kind of go through the content of that page, we'll find the rel canonical and we'll go off and crawl the other URL and see if they match and then fold them together. But the first step is really to index the URL as you have it there. So my recommendation there would be if you consistently have this within your website, that you have a large number of URLs that are being crawled and indexed even though they're not canonical, I try to work on making sure that at least internally within your website, you're linking consistently directly to your canonicals. So as much as possible, instead of providing kind of bad URLs and then using the canonical to clean that up, make sure you're providing the right URLs from the start so that we don't have to go through this canonical change. That said, this is information just for your information in Webmaster Tools. It doesn't mean that this is going to be a problem. It doesn't mean that this is going to cause any issues with your crawling, indexing, or ranking of those URLs. This is essentially just providing you with this information so that if you weren't aware of that, now you have that information. So it's definitely not a critical thing, but if you want to clean it up, cleaning it up on your website directly without relying on the canonical to clean that up for you probably makes sense. What do you suggest for e-commerce content strategy? Wow, that's a big question. I probably need to look into that a little bit more, what specifically you're trying to find out there. And maybe one thing you could do is start maybe a thread in one of the help forums or on Google Plus and get advice from other webmasters and kind of elaborate a little bit more of what you're looking at. Because making e-commerce sites is a really big topic, and there are lots of possibilities, and some things work well for some websites and other things work well for other websites. So there's no one size that fits all of these sites. If our design requires our page header to be an image, do we lose any SEO or AdWords quality score, variables, benefits if we implement an image with alt in our H1 tag instead of text? I don't know how AdWords handles these kind of situations. I can't speak for them, so from that point of view, I can't really say. With regards to search engines, one of the things to keep in mind is that we tend not to look at the text that's within the image. So if this image, for example, is a heading that explains what your website is about, what your business is about, and this is text within that image, then that's not something that we're going to be easily able to kind of take into account for your website there, for those pages. So if this is your heading, it's all in an image file, there's no alt text, maybe there's no other information about this on your page, then that's really going to be tricky for us to actually pick up. So from that point of view, having a clear heading on your page that's readable in text, something that explains what your page is about, that explains what your business is about, usually makes sense. If you're talking about a logo, for example, where you have your company name, but you also have your company name in the alt text, you also have your company name elsewhere on the page, then usually that's less of a problem. We have enough information about your pages, about your company, to understand that this is a part of your page there. Whereas if this is really the main heading of a page and it's all in an image, then that's really tricky for us to pick up. We give out iframes to affiliates, but sometimes affiliates don't embed the iframe properly. Let me take a quick look at what kind of iframe this is, what we're looking at. Oops. And I need to log in separately for that. OK, so I can't take a look at the details there. Sometimes affiliates don't embed the iframe properly, but link to the code. The image on top. Is this seen as a link? Should we try to stop this? Let me see if I can get the URL anyway to see if we can find something there. Let me take a quick look. Oops. Too many open tabs. I shouldn't play around so much fun in the Hangout. I'd have to take a look at the details there. That's really hard to say without looking into the details there too much. So what I'd recommend doing is maybe starting a thread in the help forum, maybe starting something on Google Plus, and just adding me there. And I'm happy to take a quick look to see if there's something specific that might be problematic there. If I added a site to my disavow file on, say, March 1st, and I see the site has been cached on March 7th, can I assume that my disavow for that domain has taken effect? If not, is there a way to know that a domain I've disavowed has actually been disavowed? The disavow file, if you do a site directive, a domain directive in the disavow file, essentially that means every time we crawl a page from that domain, we'll take that disavow file into account. So this isn't something that's based on the homepage of that domain, because the homepage might change differently than actual pages on the site. So it would be something that's more based on the individual pages themselves and the links from there. So in a case like this, if the link was from the home page and you check the cached page and you see that it's updated, then definitely that's been taken into account. If this is on an individual page of that site and you've seen that it's been updated in the cache, then that's also definitely been taken into account. In general, I wouldn't use the cache page as the main method for recognizing when a page has been updated in our index, because a lot of times we'll update our index without updating the cache page. But if you do see an update in the cache page, then we've definitely updated our index in the meantime. So the cache page is kind of like a way of double checking that if you wanted to check that individually, but it's not a guarantee that if it doesn't update that it hasn't been crawled and indexed again. And again, this is on a per page basis, so not on the domain. It's not the case that if we recache the home page of the domain that we've recached everything from that domain.
John, are there any other ways that we can check that? Or is that the only kind of sort of half-baked method we can do that?
That we've crawled individual pages from a site. I guess the cache page is a reasonable way of doing that. And again, it's possible that we've updated our index without updating the cache page, but if the cache page is updated, then we've definitely updated our index in the meantime. The tricky part, I guess, there is if you have a lot of pages on a website, then it's going to be hard to double check that all of these were actually updated. But the cache page is certainly a way of seeing if the index has been updated. It's not a guarantee if it doesn't change that it hasn't been updated, though.
But there's no other sort of techniques we could use to dig out information otherwise. That's pretty much the only avenue that we would have to go down.
Yeah, I mean, some pages have things like a date stamp on them. What you can do sometimes is do something like a site query and search for a specific date to see if that's been picked up. That's something I like to use. That works really well if these pages have a date stamp on them. I tend to use them just to double check that we're crawling properly and check, for example, international time websites. But a lot of sites have a date stamp on them, and you can find things like that to kind of double check that they were actually picked up.
Okay, thanks, John.
For purpose of ranking on mobile search, does Google use content from desktop or mobile site? In the case of a mobile site that has less content than a desktop site, the site in question has responsive design on one URL and both desktop and mobile. For both desktop and mobile. So usually what we recommend for smartphone websites, I'm assuming this is for smartphone website, is that you use a rel canonical to point to your desktop page. So in a case like that, we'll recognize the connection between the desktop version and the mobile version, but the version that we actually use for indexing is going to be the desktop version, because like you mentioned, usually that's the one that has the most content, that has the most internal links as well, so we can crawl the rest of the site. So what would happen there is if you set it up like that, we'll crawl and index both of these versions. We'll focus on the desktop version to show in search. We might swap out the URL for the mobile version for users of smartphones, but we'll actually use the content of the desktop version to actually do the ranking. This can theoretically get a bit complicated if your mobile version is actually the one that has more content than the desktop version, which theoretically could happen if you have something that's really focused on mobile users that doesn't make so much sense for desktop users. And in a case like that, we'd recommend not using the rel canonical between these two versions, because you essentially want your mobile version to be ranking independently of the desktop version in a case like that. But in most cases where the mobile version has less content, where there's a clear connection between the desktop version and the mobile version, you'll want the desktop version to be the one used for crawling, indexing, and ranking mostly.
So John, is it possible then that you might have your mobile site, your smartphone version, and somebody does a query search for explanation of how widget is used, but when you get to the mobile version, that kind of explanation is taken out because, you know, obviously it's too big for the mobile version? Would you still deliver the customer on their cell phone to that mobile version, or would you then deliver them to the desktop version? Even though it's, I guess, when the customer lands on the page, it's going to be responsive and turn them into a mobile version anyway.
Yeah, so from our point of view, it's important that the primary content is equivalent, and usually that's not a problem, because on a mobile version you'll drop things like the sidebars, simplify the menu, simplify the footer, maybe reduce the size of the images, but the primary content is usually the same. So that's essentially what we look for with that connection to the mobile version, to kind of confirm that we have it right. If the mobile version really doesn't have the content of the desktop version and we send them to the mobile version, or the site itself redirects the user to the mobile version, then that's kind of a tricky situation that we can't always catch. But we try to recognize those situations and make sure we're not associating them appropriately.
Yeah. All right, thanks, John.
Okay, we've recently added some pagination to our site so that Google can crawl and pick up more pages. However, the index page count has hardly moved. Should I be worried? Generally, what happens with pagination, if you're talking about rel next, rel previous, those kind of things, then that's something that helps us to better understand the individual pages of the site. But we wouldn't necessarily crawl and index much more content there, because you'd still kind of really need to have those normal HTML links between the individual pages anyway, so that we can crawl and index those individual pages. So in a case like this, if you're adding pagination by using rel next, rel previous, then that's something that you'd more likely kind of see some subtle results in search, so in your ranking for those pages, in which pages we show in the search results, than you would for the number of indexed URLs. If the number of indexed URLs is a problem, then usually that's a sign that the links between these pages aren't really working out that well, or perhaps that we don't really know if we can trust this website enough to actually spend so much more time picking up all of the content from those pages. So what I do there is primarily double check the technical situation to see that we're actually picking up all of the content, that we're able to find the links, and then work on making sure that the quality of your content is really the highest it can be, so that it's not just a matter of putting content out there that you want to have indexed, but actually that it's high quality content, that it's something unique, something compelling to the user, something we should be showing in search, something that's not just aggregated or copied or kind of rewritten from other websites. It seems like there's a flag penalty which prevents rich snippets from appearing for a site. If it's true, what can I do about it? This site used to have stars, now not anymore. There are a few things that kind of can influence whether or not we show rich snippets for a website. I think we have a pretty good Help Center article on that. The primary things that you'd want to watch out for are the technical issues, whether or not they're implemented correctly. Then, of course, there are policy questions, whether or not they're implemented in a way that we want to kind of show to users. For example, on home pages, it almost never makes sense to show stars, review-rich snippets, because your homepage isn't about one specific product. It's usually about your company, about something general. So that's not something where you'd want to show those rich snippets. Other kind of policy issues, for example, is if those reviews aren't actually reviews by your users, but rather reviews that you're aggregating from elsewhere. So if you're taking a feed from a big e-commerce site, if you're taking a feed from some review website and just showing those on your pages, then that's not something we'd show in search as a rich snippet. Similarly, if the reviews on your pages are kind of about your content and not about a product or a service that you're describing, then that's something we also wouldn't show in search results. So we've seen this, for example, with plugins that are available for WordPress, where you can just add like the 5-star review thing to your blog, and your readers can rate your blog posts with those 5 stars, and your site kind of shows those as rich snippets to Google. Then that's something we wouldn't want to trust, because essentially it's not a review of a product, but rather a review of the text that you're providing there, and that's not something we'd want to show. So those are kind of the policy questions that are involved there. From a kind of higher level point of view, we also take a look at the quality of a website overall. So if we find that we can't completely trust this website with what it's providing, with the quality of its content, then we're much less likely to actually show rich snippets in search, even if they're implemented correctly. Just because if we can't really trust this content, why would we want to show it even more visibly in the search results if we already know that maybe there's something problematic with this content? So that's kind of the more subtle kind of issues that you might be looking at there. What I'd recommend doing is taking that and posting in one of the Webmaster forums and asking some of the more experienced users there for their opinion. On the one hand, about the quality of your website. On the other hand, about things like policy questions with regards to your use of the rich snippets, just to make sure that you're kind of covering all of the possible issues there. I'm assuming if your rich snippets used to show up, then technically they're implemented correctly. So that should be okay. You can double check that in our testing tool, though. So that's kind of the baseline that you would want to work on, and then making sure you have the policy and the general quality issues covered as well. What do we do if we submit our site news in a good authority news PR site, but it gets distributed to poor authority news sites, which may be done automatically, and our site gets a poor authority backlink? Will Google consider it unnatural and we need to disavow it? So generally speaking, you should take care if you're just submitting articles, for example, to article databases or PR websites. If you're doing that primarily in the hope of getting a link back from those sites, because that would be considered an unnatural backlink regardless of the quality of the site that's actually linking to you. So essentially, if you're providing this article for them, and in exchange for them being able to use your content, they have to link to your site, then that's considered an unnatural backlink. And that doesn't really matter about the quality of the site itself, but essentially just the whole process there. On the other hand, if you're submitting a PR article in the sense that you're kind of explaining your new service, explaining your new company, explaining a new product that you have, and this is something that you're putting out on PR websites, and you're not doing this to get a link back. Maybe you just have your URL in the footer somewhere, it's not even linked, or it has a rel nofollow, then generally that's fine, and that's not something where I'd worry about lower quality websites scraping that and reusing that. But essentially, just kind of instead of looking at the quality of those websites, take a step back and think about why you're doing this. Are you doing this to kind of get the word out about your product? And in that case, having a nofollow link on there, for example, would be absolutely fine. You're getting the word out. People can go to your website to check it out. On the other hand, if you're doing this primarily to get links, then regardless of the site that's kind of publishing it, that's going to be an unnatural link and something you might want to take care of.
John, if you are doing it for legitimate reasons, and it's a naked link at the bottom of a PR site of some kind, and then scraper sites pick that up, and their design of their site is to take a naked link and make it a clickable link, which many of these really low quality sites actually do, then you don't really have any control. You're not putting a link in the article in the first place. You're simply putting a naked URL as a reference, and then the other websites are responsible for picking up your content and doing things with it that you had never intended. And I think that's the question that's circulating around the many forums and places at the moment. Is there an answer for that?
So I think there's a two-part answer for that. On the one hand, we try to recognize these as much as possible and just ignore them automatically. I think we're pretty good at that. The other part is if you do recognize this yourself and if you're aware of kind of the problematic behind it, you can put it in your disavow file and just forget about it. Just put the whole domain in there if you know this is a really low-quality PR site, and you never have to worry about that again. So you can kind of take the problem in your own hands and kind of take it out and make sure it doesn't cause any problems. Or if you don't know about this and this is something that essentially just happens like for one of these PR releases that you did, and your website is normally connected to the rest of the internet and you're not out buying links anyway, then this is something you generally don't need to worry about anyway. So we do take a look at the bigger picture as well. We take a look at the bigger picture algorithmically as well, and if we see that you're not like pushing out press releases every couple of days with links in there, then that's something that's not going to cause any problems.
When you say that, do you mean that algorithmically or manually? Because obviously the algorithm isn't kind of controlled in that sense. The algorithm picks up what it picks up, and if it's nasty, then you kind of have a suppression of some sorts.
We do take that into account both algorithmically and manually. So we try to look at the bigger picture and see how things are working for this website, and if it looks like a website is primarily using these kind of methods for link spam, then the algorithms will pick up a lot stronger on that. Whereas if they see this happening once or twice or a couple of times, and the rest of the website is doing normally, then that's something the algorithms will say, well, you know, weird sites link in weird ways. The webmaster can't control all of that. We shouldn't kind of penalize this website for something that some random spammer is doing that doesn't even know what they're kind of running on their servers.
I think that's some great information there. I think that will give a lot of people a lot of confidence, actually, and that's something I think people have been waiting to hear. So that really is a great bit of info from this Hangout, Tom. Thanks.
Thanks. All right. Here's one about coupon sites. I'm running a coupon site which is providing discount coupons and deals for Indian shopping stores. My question is, what should I do with my store page, which don't have any coupons for some time? Yeah, I think usually when it comes to coupon sites, I think there are a few things that are always problematic or tricky to handle there. On the one hand, it's important that you really have unique and compelling content of your own on these sites so that when users go there, they actually find something that they can use. So things like outdated content that they can't use anymore, content which isn't valid, scraped content from other sites, descriptions, images, those kind of things scraped from other sites. That's all kind of content where when we recognize that this is happening on a website, our quality algorithms will go and say, I don't know if we can really trust this website that much. And they might take a look at the website overall and see there's a large part of the site that's kind of low quality or that could be seen as low quality. And that's something that can affect the whole website. So that's, I think, the primary problem I see with regards to these kind of coupon sites. Your question, I think, with regards to store pages that don't have any coupons for some time, I would tend to see that as an empty search results page. So someone is searching for a specific store and there's no content that you have available for that store, then essentially that's an empty search results page, which is a bad user experience. So what I would do there is make sure that those pages aren't actually indexed like that. So one thing you could do is, for example, put a no index on those pages so that we can crawl those pages. We can see if there's content there. We can see the no index and say, OK, well, the webmaster doesn't want this index, so we won't index it. And if we don't index it and don't show it in search, then from our point of view, that's fine. I mean, that's not something where you're taking low-quality content and presenting it to users in search. The content they find in search is useful for them. So if you know that you have these pages on your site that don't actually have any content on them, make sure that they're not indexable. So put a no index on them. In those cases, people who are still using your website and searching within your website, they can still go there. They can see that this store is tracked by your website, for example, but you don't have any content for it at the moment. So they can still interact with your website in that regard, but those empty pages don't actually show up in search. And it's fine to have pages that fluctuate between being indexed and having a no index. So if you have content for them now, you don't have content for them next week, then putting in no index next week, and maybe a week afterwards you do have more content, taking that no index away is fine. And that's something you can probably even automate in a way that you don't really have to worry about it individually. The alt text from an image on a website, will it appear as a text snippet in Google search? Sometimes. So we do take the alt text into account when we kind of index pages for web search. So that could potentially show up in the text snippet of a result as well. I have a website, and I read news, and I write the post on my blog, and some keywords match, but I still give credits to the content like it is about a Google Doodle. I'll give credits to the Google Doodle. Is it copyrighted stuff? So I think the general question here is you read about something in the news, you find out about something maybe online, and you write a blog post about it, essentially rewording what you found online. And from our point of view, that quickly gets into kind of the low-quality content area in the sense that you're taking content that already exists online, you're changing it around a little bit, maybe rewriting it in your own words, and putting it back online. And you're not providing anything new while doing this. You're kind of just rehashing the stuff that's already found there, and providing a link back or even giving credit to the original source isn't really going to make your content higher quality. So what I would do in a case like this is maybe find a niche where you're really comfortable in, where you know a little bit more than the average reporter out there, where you can take a news report that's online somewhere and turn that into something that has a little bit more value, or take maybe multiple news reports and compile the unique information from there into something that has a little bit more value on your side. So instead of just taking content from other sites, rehashing that and putting that on your website, make sure you're providing something that makes sense to crawl and index on your own, so that when Google comes along and sees, OK, I have this original source and I have your rewritten copy here, our algorithms can quickly say, well, both of these are actually good pieces of information. We could point the user to both of them. Whereas if our algorithms are looking at it and saying, oh, well, this has really good information written by a high-quality known author, and this one over here is kind of the same as this one here, so we don't really need to index it separately. And our algorithms, when they look at a site overall, they might say, oh, well, a large part of this site here is actually just rehashed content from this site here, or maybe from 2 or 3 other sources. So it doesn't really make sense for us to even put that much effort into crawling and indexing this site here, because it's nothing really unique, nothing interesting of its own. So from that point of view, I really make sure that what you're providing actually provides more value than just the copy of the content. And there are lots of ways that you could go about that, including things like having a lot of users who are active on your site who are discussing this topic as well. So user-generated content is definitely something you can build on as well. But just taking content, rewriting it, and putting it on your site, that's probably not a good strategy for the long run.
John, can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
We implemented the hreflang and put our code.uk website up, and we appear to be ranking reasonably well considering we have no backlinks to the site and various other things. So, and ranking much better than our .com, which is still suffering, which would suggest to us our content is of a reasonable nature and that Google likes something that we're doing. So it would suggest that our .com is under some form of suppression, which we are aware of. Now, what else can I do now? Am I in a waiting game for this next Penguin refresh, or I mean, I went in and I managed to disavow another 300 links that Google Webmaster Tools didn't find, but some other programs did. But I'm out of ideas now. If there is anything else that I can do.
I'd have to take a look at your site specifically there, but in general, if for example an algorithm like Penguin has picked up issues in the past, then that's something you kind of need to wait for that algorithm to update. So there's no kind of workaround around that algorithm to force it to update or to kind of be whitelisted by that algorithm. That's something that really needs to happen naturally.
But without a refresh, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, there have been various discussions, even on your Google Plus page. There was one, and where we were discussing whether or not I think it was Alison from the top contributor on Google Forums was saying that you rank naturally where you rank now, and very clearly that isn't the case. Especially seeing the .co.uk site live, that isn't the case. There is algorithmic issues, and as you said, we do have to wait for a refresh.
Yeah, but I mean, that's it's hard to say whether or not. I mean, it's almost, I guess, arguing semantics with regards to ranking naturally, because at the moment the site is ranking naturally if it doesn't have any manual actions on it that are kind of manually pulling the site down. And if these are algorithms that just haven't been refreshed or kind of had their data updated, then that's still, from our point of view, a part of the natural ranking. But I also see your point of view in the sense that if this algorithm is updated, then it would show perhaps different data. But that would be the new natural ranking at that point.
Yeah, I think anybody looking at it from my point of view would see that as a suppression, and it is semantics. It is a case of wording, unfortunately. I think yeah, it's a very difficult kind of thing to look at on that front. And one thing that stemmed from that we spoke about last week or the week before is I'm seeing a very large amount of traffic and URLs of people coming to our site for titles that are incorrect, even though even though we've got them written correctly. So we're getting phone calls, people asking us for a service that we don't provide because the titles have been rewritten.
Could you send me some examples of that?
I will do. Yeah.
So some search results where you're saying you search for this keyword and Google is showing this title, which is clearly wrong. Because that's the kind of thing we can take back to the titles team, and they're very receptive for this kind of feedback because we work hard on making these titles work. They have to fit the limited space that we have. The space is limited depending on the device as well. So that's something where if we can improve those algorithms, then it's not just your website that sees an improvement. We'll be able to improve that across the board.
Yeah, I'll send you an email right after this and with some details. Thanks, John.
All right, Google decided this was thin content and placed a manual action on the site. We immediately placed a meta no index follow on all geographical pages. Google dropped about 30,000 pages from its index pretty quickly. However, about 2,600 pages. Ooh, let's see. Hard to tell which ones fit together here. Let's see, maybe this one. About 2,600 pages which are being purged from Google's index very slowly. The issue has been going on for 3 months, and we're doing everything we can to show Google we're good guys. We put in a reconsideration request almost 29 days ago, but heard nothing back as yet, good or bad. And I put in another reconsideration request 2 days ago. So how can we have the manual action lifted, or at least looked at? Which is the best way to remove the remaining pages to satisfy Google of our intent? Ooh, these are long combinations. Hard to figure out which ones belong together. Leave the meta no index in place, or place a 410 gone on these pages, or something else. So I didn't quite see where this started, what essentially happened with your website. But essentially, if you know that these are thin content pages, then putting a no index follow on there is absolutely fine. The follow is the default behavior, so just putting a no index on there would be just as good. Putting a 410 gone on those pages would also work from our point of view. The difference between the 410 and the no index is primarily on the user side, though. So from our point of view, both the no index and the 410 would result in that page dropping out of our index. From a user side, a page with a no index is still accessible, still normal to be used within a website, whereas a page with a 410 usually is something that would show an error to them. So if this is content that you think is thin, but not necessarily thin in the sense that you don't want users to see it at all, then maybe a no index is better. Users can still use your website to find that content. They just won't find it in search. Whereas if it's a 410, then users wouldn't be able to go to that content at all within your website. So depending on what you're trying to do there on the user side, you can choose between the 410 or the no index. From our point of view, both of them are essentially equivalent. I'm not sure which kind of manual action your website initially had there, so it's really hard to say what you should be focusing on there. If this is something where you received a notice saying that the quality of your content is bad or it's thin content, those kind of things, then cleaning it up like this is pretty good on the one hand. It's a really strong sign that you're trying to do the right thing there. It really kind of depends on the rest of your content, though, with regards to how the web spam team would look at that. So if you're, for example, if you're aggregating news from a variety of sources and you're just no indexing the pages that don't have any content at all, then that's probably not going to be enough. They probably want to see that you actually have something unique and compelling of your own, where we could send users kind of without having to worry about your website. On the other hand, if it was only these pages that were actually the problem, then using the no index there is probably okay. And you probably know yourself whether or not the rest of your website is something that is of high quality, that provides a service that can't be found elsewhere. What you could also do, if you'd like me to take a quick look at that, is send me a short note on Google+, and I can take a quick look at that with the web spam team. I can't promise to send you a response. I get a lot of questions like this, but I'm happy to take a look with the web spam team just to double check that things are working out as they should. Why sometimes on one specific keyword I see maps in the search results and sometimes not? We try to recognize whether or not the user is looking for something that's geographically specific, and we'll sometimes show search results with the map then. And that can differ, for example, depending on the device that you're using. Sometimes it makes more sense to show a map for a mobile user. Sometimes it makes less sense to show a map for a mobile user, for example. So that's something that really depends on the kind of the query and the kind of intent that we assume that the user has. So one example, for example, is if you're looking for a local restaurant and you search for a restaurant in your city name, then that's a clear sign for us that you're looking for something specific, maybe on a map. If your next query is just pizza, for example, without a city name, then we could assume that you're actually still looking for something local. Whereas if you just search for pizza without previously doing anything else, then maybe you're looking for a pizza recipe and you want a recipe instead of a local pizza place. So those are kind of the situations where sometimes you might see a map, sometimes you don't see a map. Is it possible to have 2 Google Analytics tracking codes on each page? Would this cause tracking issues? I can't speak for Google Analytics. I don't know for sure, but I think this is possible. I think I've done this in the past for some things. Mostly I did this accidentally and didn't realize I was doing it. But you probably want to double check with someone from the analytics side, maybe in the analytics help forum. I'm a simple blogger. I don't know anything technical. My competitor sends thousands of links to my blog. My blog is punished by Penguin. In a case like that, if you're looking at the links in Webmaster Tools, for example, I might go ahead and submit a disavow file for those links there. In general, we do recognize these kind of situations and handle them appropriately. But I'd also take a look at the other things that you're doing. So are you building links yourself? Are you kind of running multiple blogs and linking them between each other? Are you going to forums and kind of posting things there? Are you like commenting on other sites just to get a link back? All of these things are things that essentially are seen as unnatural links and could be problematic as well. And similarly, the content is also something that we focus on very strongly. So making sure that the content on your site is of the highest quality possible is also quite important. What I'd recommend doing in a situation like this is getting some feedback from peers. So going to maybe a local webmaster forum, maybe there are local meetups for webmasters as well, maybe there are Google Plus groups that you feel comfortable posting in, and kind of getting feedback from peers to see what they would see when they look at your website. If they see that perhaps there are quality issues that you could focus on, if they see that there are things you're doing to promote your website which are outside of our webmaster guidelines, all of those things are definitely worth looking at with someone who's gone through these kind of processes before. So just because you see these links pointing at your site doesn't necessarily mean that they're the cause for anything specific with regards to your site in our search results. But if you do see these links, cleaning them up with a disavow file is something that doesn't take that much effort, so you could definitely do that if you wanted to do that.
John, is it possible you can have algorithmic issues with links that are not listed in your Webmaster Tools example list of links?
Theoretically, it's possible. I think I'd see this mostly from the point of view, for example, if you have site-wide links from another site, then we only show a small sample of those site-wide links in Webmaster Tools. And of course, the rest of the links on that site could be just the same. So if, for example, you have a site-wide advertisement on one website and you don't have a nofollow there, then that's something we could pick up from an algorithmic point of view. And in Webmaster Tools, we'll just show a sample of links from that site. So that's something that wouldn't necessarily mean that you only have to put a nofollow on those individual URLs in Webmaster Tools, but rather clean up the site-wide issue completely so that it doesn't get taken into account at all.
Sure, but more on a domain basis then, regardless of. You tend to try and pretty much list not list all the good ones, but more listing the bad ones so that you can actually find them. Is that kind of, or is it completely random?
We try to focus on the more important ones, the ones that we would count more. And theoretically, if those more active ones are the ones that we find problematic, they'd be kind of more problematic. Whereas if they're individual ones that we don't list there that are problematic, then usually they're kind of so small that they don't carry that much weight that they actually be really problematic. Theoretically, it could be that you have a ton of really small sites that are kind of problematic, and they kind of add up. But I think in most cases, that's not going to happen.
So somebody maybe being negatively SEO'd or whatever it might be going on in a huge way, they essentially, if they didn't realize it and the links didn't appear in Webmaster Tools, you're saying that kind of scenario is very, very unlikely, if not at all impossible.
I think that's very, very unlikely, yeah, because usually you'd see that in the URLs that we show in Webmaster Tools. Those are the ones we primarily use for algorithms and for manual actions. And technically or theoretically, it'd be possible that there are a lot of ones that are kind of so small that we don't actually list them in Webmaster Tools, but there are just so many of them that they do add up to something quantifiable. But that's, I think, highly unlikely, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you.
All right. This is the same question as we had before. Does the position of the keyword in the URL help in rankings? For example, if you have product name in the URL or not. We do take that into account slightly, but it's not something where you'd see a noticeable change if you had it or didn't have it in there. In the past, it's been that we show that in the search results. However, more and more we're showing breadcrumbs in search results anyway, which are kind of the text information from there. So even if you just had IDs in the URL, then that wouldn't stop you from ranking for those keywords. So this isn't something where I'd say you artificially need to put those keywords in there. If you have them in there, that's fine. If you don't have them in there, that's fine. You don't artificially need to change that around. We have a partner program that has been passing PageRank through banners and links to our site, which we've changed this all to be no-follow. Is this sufficient to recover from a manual penalty? Depending on what all your site has been doing, that might be sufficient, yeah. But you really need to take a look at the overall picture of your site, how it's interacting, how it's linking with other sites to kind of see if that's really enough. What you could do is submit a reconsideration request detailing the changes you've made there, and you'll get a response back from the web spam team saying that, yes, this is good, we've dropped the manual action, or no, we still see issues, and maybe we'll show you some examples so that you can focus on those as well. The thing to keep in mind with reconsideration requests is sometimes they can take a few weeks to be processed, and it's not something where you'd want to kind of iteratively send new ones all the time. So instead of like sending one today and one in 2 days and one in a week, maybe think about what you're trying to do, clean it up as much as possible, submit a reconsideration request, and make sure you've got everything covered that you might want to look at in the next couple of days anyway. So clean up before you do the reconsideration request, and then give it some time to be reprocessed. Don't resubmit it again. All right, we're totally out of time and have a million questions left.
Would you mind if I ask one since I'm on?
Sure, go for it.
Is our site is under some kind of, I believe, algorithmic issue because we don't have a manual penalty? Is the fact that our site is now almost in all cases demoted to other results, you know, click here to show all results, is that a sign of any particular issue, such as, I'm guessing, Panda because of a duplicate content issue? Or is it indicative of anything else in most cases?
That could be pretty much anything. So Usually we show that kind of link at the bottom of the search results if we know there are other pages that are essentially the same as the ones we've already shown. So like you mentioned, duplicate content, that could be an issue there. And it's not necessarily a sign of any algorithmic or manual action that your site is being kind of put in that place, or that we're showing that at all for your search results. But usually just a sign that we have something that already matches that content in the search results before, and we think that these additional results don't provide any extra value there. So that could be, for example, if you have an e-commerce site, if your descriptions match exactly what we've shown already, then we wouldn't need to show it again. But it's not a sign of any specific algorithm.
Right. I mean, I'll share this link in chat anyway, just in case you've got a chance to look at it. But it's certain. I think maybe I should speak to Gary afterwards, because it seems like when you take a snippet from one of our product pages, which is unique to our products, the scrapers are all, in every case, ranking above us, even though if you look at that particular URL, the product from our site has, it's sold thousands of times. It has 50, 60, 70 reviews on it. It has 50 people on Facebook liking it, and every other site is trying to be objective, worse than ours, because all they've done is taken our product.
Mm-hmm.
We have no manual penalty at all. I can't I can't fathom how a human, if there was a manual review, which I would love, could look at that and say, okay, these sites ranking above you provide more value, because you're pulling through our rich snippets, our reviews, everything, and still considering it worse than the other ones that have nothing, literally nothing of value to add.
Yeah, I can take a look at that specific site. We also have a form to report scraper problems.
Yeah, I've done that and been doing it for months. But without, and I have emailed you 2 or 3 times after other Hangouts, John, and I haven't. I know you've got thousands of people emailing you. Perhaps Gary and I should form a club of.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately, you're not the only ones. Yeah.
No, I know, but I try and be objective. I help others in the forums as well, as I'm sure other people do.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at it and say, okay, Google knows there's loads of reviews on here. Google knows it's our content. Google can see that, and yet it still chooses to promote other sites above us that clearly took it and published it later, but won't, officially penalize us.
Mm-hmm.
So does that definitely say algorithm?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to kind of keep in mind is, especially when you're looking at individual cases there, is that we do tend to look at the site overall as well. So finding individual cases sometimes is a little bit easier than kind of looking at the quality of the site overall. So I'm not sure exactly which one your site is here. I
mean, you only have to look down to results 6 or 7. It's experience days. It's the one with the reviews and everything.
Okay. Yeah. So for example, sometimes we see this in cases where a site, I'll exclude your site from here. I've looked at it before, but sometimes we see this in cases where a site primarily has content that's been copied from other sources and has individual articles, for example, that are unique and actually pretty good. And in those cases, we might see the site overall as being kind of lower quality, and we'll have trouble recognizing that these individual pages are actually useful. So if you search for a snippet from something that's useful on that site, it'll look like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But if you look at the site overall, we'd say, well, this is kind of matches the overall experience on average from this website. I don't think that's the case with your website.
No, every page is unique. It's and we're an e-commerce site, so they're all product, apart from a few categories, obviously. As people are saying, it is ripping the content off in the chat. We've been around for 10 years. Every single page is unique. I'm literally a bit like Gary at wit's end as to say what is wrong with the site. People say, well, create unique content, build new links. The sort of links we've gained naturally in the last 6 months from Fox News, Huffington Post, all of these sites you literally can't buy, and yet there's still no change whatsoever. We don't do any hand on heart, we didn't do any SEO. We gave that game up a long time ago because we know it doesn't work. And so I mean, looking at it,
I'll
can
take
you
a look
say
at
that
it with
that's?
engineers. Yeah.
Do you mind? Because that would be great. And Gary, perhaps we should exchange details. And
okay.
Thank you.
Great. We'll take another look at that one. All right. So with that, let's take a break here. I wish you guys a great weekend. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for all the big questions and discussions. It's been really interesting again. And I hope to see you guys in, I think, 2 weeks or 1.5 weeks, something like that. Thanks. Have a good time.
John. Excellent hangout. Much appreciated. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, John. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.